Thank you all so much. Thanks for joining us. Do not try to adjust your TV sets. The horn that John is holding is a little bit smaller than the horn he normally has. In honor of the great Charlie Parker, he's busted out his little alto. We call it Junior. The little junior horn there. So tiny and petite. If you haven't met him yet, please give a warm welcome to Mr. John Sanford on the alto saxophone. On a regular size instrument, please give it up for Mr. Louis Hurvo on the regular size piano. And of course, back here on the bass, holding it down with me, Mr. Kevin Smith. That opening tune was entitled Groovin' High, and it's one of kind of the quintessential bebop songs written by the great Charlie Parker. It's a good example of how a bebop song works. Hear all those complicated melodies, it's kind of hip rhythmically, but actually it's laid on top of a tune, of a standard called How High the Moon. It's the same chord changes as How High the Moon. John just looked at me like, is it really? Isn't it? No. Ornithology is How High the Moon. Whoops, okay. Which one is it? I've already blanked on it. Come on, Kevin. I pay you tens of dollars to remember these things. Okay, so, but we're gonna get into the idea that how these songs are written and why they're written over popular standards, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. We're gonna start with why, or basically his youth and how he kind of developed the way he did. Charlie Parker was born in Kansas City, and when he was starting to grow up, even at a young age, there were some interesting things going on in Kansas City. There was a pretty famous or infamous politician in Kansas City named Thomas Pendergast. And these gentlemen came down in slick-looking suits from the city of Chicago. And they were having trouble doing their business in Chicago. They were kind of getting run out of that town. So they brought their slightly less than legal business down to Kansas City. And they're like, here's what we would like to do our business and work out of some of these nightclubs where we can just kind of exchange cash and nobody's going to really look, and we'll slip you some of that money if you'll let us kind of run our Chicago gangster business out of your little small Midwest town. And he was more than happy to let them do that. And the really important part here is this was happening basically right smack dab in the middle of the Depression. So many other areas were really hurting for work, but Kansas City was thriving, particularly the dance club scene, the music club scene, where all these gangsters would hang out, and all of these places. They said there were dozens and dozens. One person even said there were over 50 of these nightclubs in downtown Kansas City, kind of at the height of this. So all of those clubs have to have musicians. So a lot of great musicians flocked to Kansas City. A lot of great dance bands were out of there. And so a young Charlie Parker lived there because his dad was a vaudeville musician, and he was trying to make a living in Kansas City doing vaudeville. But it quickly became evident that vaudeville was kind of becoming passé in favor of swing or dance bands. So Charlie's dad up and left him and his mom to go try and find work elsewhere. So it was just him and his mom. His mom worked nights, she worked nights as a cleaning lady and basically slept most of the day getting ready for her night shift. So this gave Charlie Parker the option or basically the opportunity to skip school because his mom was sleeping and then stay up all night because his mom was working all night. When his dad left, to cheer him up, she bought him a saxophone. And he fell in love with the saxophone and would practice for, he said, 11, 12, sometimes 15 hours a day. Charlie said that at one point, his neighbors kind of had an intervention with his mom and said, you guys have to move. I cannot listen to that kid practice the saxophone for another minute. But he was obsessed with it. He would, as a young kid, would sneak out and go to these clubs and listen to all this great Kansas City blues and Kansas City swing music. So this was really kind of at the heart of his sound, was this Kansas City blues playing. He practiced and practiced. He finally got up the nerve to go to a jam session and play. And there's a famous story about him going to a jam session early on, and he comes up and he starts playing. And one of the most famous Kansas City musicians in that time, the drummer Joe Jones, Papa Joe Jones from the Count Basie Band, was the drummer. And young Charlie Parker was struggling a little bit to keep up, and it got so bad that Papa Joe took a cymbal off and threw it on the floor to make the tune stop. And Charlie said, one of Charlie's friends said, what he told me afterwards was, "I'm going to fix those cats. I got it tonight, but I'm going to show them." And he went home and practiced even harder, which probably was the best thing that could have happened to him, because then he would slowly start to develop this kind of new language that he would practice. And so slowly word started to get out about this young kid playing saxophone like this. Then the Cab Calloway Orchestra is going to come through Kansas City, and a young trumpet player who was really starting to tear up the scene named Dizzy Gillespie was in that band. And everybody was like, "Man, Dizzy, you got to meet this guy, Charlie Parker. He's incredible." Dizzy said he was suspect at first. He was like, I played with a lot of great saxophone. I played with Coleman Hawkins. I played with Lester Young. I'll see it when I believe it. And he said by the end of the first night of hanging out with Charlie Parker, he said it was like, he goes, "This is as close to meeting Jesus as I'm ever going to get." He said, he said, "This kid's got it." So the two of them hit it off, and they started practicing together and writing music. And then they would get each other in each other's bands. And so this is where Charlie and Dizzy started to meet people like Max Roach and Mary Lou Williams and all these great musicians. And then eventually they would move to New York and start to try to cultivate this scene in New York. And around 1949, all this practicing for Charlie Parker really comes into shape. He's playing one night on a dance band gig, and he's playing this old Charlie Barnett hit, Cherokee. And over Cherokee, he has this breakthrough as a soloist, and he starts playing this new language that he's been trying to kind of get in his head, and he finally has a breakthrough on the song Cherokee. And then he realizes, like, this is the new sound that he and Dizzy should be developing. That was in 1941. What's really important is what happens next. In 1942, right as Charlie Parker and Dizzy are learning and developing this language, the recording strike happens. So from 1942 to 1944, there is no recorded music. No new recorded music, which means Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie are learning and developing and growing this new style, but nobody hears it. Because, every now and then there's like little radio clips, but basically they developed this entire thing for about 3 years, and then finally when the recording strike was over, they went into the studio to record some of it. They're going to use that great song, old classic Cherokee, as the basis for their first recording. So they go into the studio and they record Cherokee, and as soon as they get they probably get like maybe 6 bars into the melody, and there's actually an audio recording of this from the old tapes. The record owner busts in and tells them to stop playing it, because part of the recording strike was that the royalties got raised. So if you played a popular song, you as a record company owed a lot more royalties. It was like, nope, you can't do that. You can't play Cherokee. So instead, Charlie quickly scratched out this other melody, and then the melody goes there, and then the rest of the song, they play Cherokee just without playing the melody. That one recording, which was in 1949, changed the shape of jazz history. The tune is entitled Coco, because it was recorded in 1945, and we're going to do our best to approximate what that would have sounded like. that was hard. When that came out, when that record came out, it literally flipped the jazz scene on its ear, because really, as they had developed that to that high of a level, nobody got to hear the stair stepping up to that because of the recording strikes. So that just really, like, quite literally came out of nowhere. The tempo of it, the complexity of the lines, all that sort of stuff. One of the interesting things about the recording is, up to this point, this relationship with Dizzy and Charlie Parker was mainly that Dizzy was kind of the band leader, who took care of the booking the gigs and all that. He kind of, had the business end of things, and Charlie was more the creative side of that relationship. So often these gigs were really Dizzy's gigs, where Bird just got to show up and play. So this is one of Bird's first recordings, and Dizzy actually just came to hang out. He wasn't going to play. He and Charlie are great friends. He wanted to kind of come and support. So this song, they were just going to play Cherokee, and the band was actually Miles Davis on trumpet, and they had a pianist, and that was the date that was booked. The night before, the pianist got into a scuffle with the police, and he was thrown in jail that night. So they didn't have a pianist for the session. And then when they couldn't play Cherokee, and Charlie Parker wrote out this complicated melody, a very young Miles Davis, who was the trumpet player on the session, he literally couldn't play it. He couldn't get it together. So Dizzy Gillespie plays this song on Miles's trumpet with Miles's mouthpiece, and when you listen to the recording, it's just drums and the two horns at first, and then as soon as that part's over, it goes to a saxophone solo, and you hear piano behind it. Dizzy played the melody on Miles's trumpet, sets the trumpet down, and then plops down and plays piano on the record. So he just happened to be in the corner. So he ended up being a pretty interesting part of bebop history because of that. We're going to talk about what the word bebop means and how that came about in just a little bit. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about bebop, but I think one of the most misunderstood or underappreciated parts of the language and the artistry of Charlie Parker is not bebop, but the other two B's. There's like the killer B's. There's bebop, there's blues, and there's ballad playing. And I mentioned that he's from Kansas City, so he's really deeply rooted in the sound of the blues. And I think this is something that makes his version of bebop so appealing to us, because he never really leaves that sound of the blues, but it's also his ability to play incredibly lyrically over a ballad that gets overlooked. We're going to do a wonderful tune right now. This is the same sort of situation. He wanted to record one of his favorite George Gershwin ballads entitled Embraceable You, but the record guy wouldn't let him play the melody to Embraceable You. So what he did instead was they just started playing Embraceable You, and instead of Charlie playing the melody, he just started soloing. And nobody who heard this record understood that that's why he did it, but it was a game changer that when they started the song, instead of hearing the melody, they just heard Charlie Parker invent a brand new melody on the spot. And this is a tradition that stuck in jazz. Artists from that point on would kind of tip their hat to Charlie Parker by playing a ballad and not playing the melody. So we're going to do our version of that now. Obviously, the real song is called Embraceable You, but on that original Charlie Parker album, it's called Meandering. So here's our version of Meandering / Embraceable You. John Sanford. So I mentioned earlier that he was developing a new language, his own language, and one way to kind of frame it is I often think about what he did is similar to what Mozart did for the classical period of European classical music, where it's, Mozart would write a million notes. There's all these cascading melodies, and they would all intersect. It was just all of these crazy notes on a page, but it all sounded so crystal clear to him that it never sounded too busy. It was just a way more notes than most other composers wrote, but it all just fit so perfectly together. It's like he could hear twice as much music than anyone else over the same space of time, and that's kind of what I hear in Charlie Parker's playing. Everyone else is playing about half as fast as he was at this point, but when he played it just sounds so together and organized and has all the shape and beauty and rhythm and soul and blues as all the other great musicians. He could just basically do it almost twice as fast as everyone else. And I'd mentioned that recording strike in the 40s, in the early 40s, where they were developing that sound that wasn't getting recorded was in Harlem. I'd mentioned that there was a little crew of them that started to kind of run into each other on Cab Calloway's band and Billy Eckstine's band and Jay McShann's band, all these great dance bands that would travel in and out of Kansas City. And these, people like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, there was a little like kind of forward-thinking crew that was kind of getting a little sick of playing swing dance music and big band music, and they were looking for a new sound. So they eventually all started to kind of congregate in New York City, in Harlem. And there's two clubs in particular. One's called Minton's Playhouse, and that's the most famous, and that's where Charles Mingus and Oscar Pettiford and great drummer Max Roach and Roy Haynes would be there, and Thelonious Monk and Dizzy and Bird and all these great musicians. There was another club called the Three Deuces, and it was basically the same thing. So there was this little circuit where they were all developing this, and then they all, not just Charlie Parker, but all of them kind of unleashed it onto the world in around 1945. I'd mentioned bebop and ballad. The third B is the blues. Charlie Parker wrote 72 compositions that we know of, and of those 72, 34 of them are blueses. So I'm terrible at math, but I know that's about half, somewhere in the ballpark of half. So half the amount of songs he wrote were pretty steeped into the blues. So we just featured kind of the ballad side of him. Now we're gonna feature one of the blues side of him. This is maybe a little bit more like old school Kansas City blues than bebop blues, which we're gonna do in just a little bit. But it's actually one of my favorite tunes of his. It has a very, very short melody, and then they launch into some old school blues. We're gonna play it for you right now. It's entitled Parker's Mood. John Sanford, Louis Herbo, Kevin Smith. Yeah. Like I said, that's a side we don't often spend enough time discussing about Charlie Parker. And we've kind of heard it on all the songs, but on the ballad we just played, Embraceable You, and on this slow blues, we take this for granted, but their ability as soloists to kind of just like float and flitter around over the time and play a whole flurry of notes, and they're still grounded kind of in that very slow groove. That just wasn't a thing before Charlie Parker. His ability to think that fast and be that free above the time was not something that musicians were doing. I consider there to be three great improvisers. And what I mean by that, at least in terms of jazz, is three musicians whose improvisations literally changed the language, changed the vernacular. The first, of course, is Louis Armstrong. He basically invented all of this. Everything we're doing is somehow stacked on top of what he kind of showed us, what he showed us was possible. And the second, the next person to really change the language, really change the game, was Charlie Parker. And then to me, the next one would be John Coltrane, right? They're just absolute game changers where it's like when Babe Ruth started hitting home runs. Like, home runs were being hit before Babe Ruth. But then when Babe Ruth rolled around, just the whole game changed, right? When Michael Jordan showed up, how everybody used to play basketball completely changed, right? And that's what he was able to do. So we take it for granted now that nowadays we know that is possible, and it's something we've all learned to do. But before Charlie Parker, that just was not really a thing. So after these records had come out, and he and Dizzy have a band, and they're starting to tour, and they're getting a little bit of buzz around them, Dizzy organizes a residency on the West Coast, a residency out in California. Back then, jazz musicians would have a band, and they would go to a club and not go for one night or 2 nights or 3 nights. They would go for several weeks at a time. And so Dizzy organized this whole band with Charlie Parker and Stan Levy and a bunch of great musicians, Milt Jackson on the vibes. And they had a residency out there, and they had a really good time out there, but their music was not received well. California was not really ready for bebop. So after a couple of weeks, Dizzy and the band packed up, and they flew back to New York, except for Charlie Parker. Charlie was, again, he's a Midwest Kansas City boy. He actually didn't really like the hustle and bustle of New York, so he preferred the laid-back vibe in California, so he stayed back there. He took his pay, and he let everybody else go, and he started to kind of play around the clubs. But again, bebop was not really accepted out there, so he struggled to work. He not only struggled to work, but now Dizzy and all of his friends are gone, and he slowly slips into a pretty bad depression. And he starts self-medicating with alcohol and drugs and stays out there for far too long and runs out of money. So then he's going to go to a local record company, and he's going to basically say, I'll make a whole bunch of records. Just give me a kind of a fairly big cash deposit up front, and I'll make a whole bunch of records for you. That first label he recorded on, that we played Coco and Embraceable You, that was Savoy Records. This record company in the West Coast is called Dial Records. And you can go get the Savoy/Dial recordings of Charlie Parker, because they're all basically kind of in the same couple of year period. So he's going to stay out there. He's going to record kind of some cool new music out there that we're going to get into in just a minute. Before we play this next song, I want to talk about that word bebop and where it came from and what it means. Dizzy Gillespie tells the story that when they were first learning to write new melodies over these standards, because they couldn't play the real standards, they had to play other melodies on top, they would write them out without naming them or anything. They just kind of wrote out the notes. And so on the gig, they would say things like, all right, let's play the one that goes, ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-dee-doo. They would kind of like sing it. And this next song, Dizzy said he would say, let's play the one that goes, bebop, ba-bebop, 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 ba-bebop. And there was a writer, like a newspaper reporter in the audience, and he wrote this down as the name of the song when a big article came out, and this song Bebop, which was named by this writer, started to become the central song that helped people understand what was different about what Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie was doing versus everyone else. So we're going to play that Dizzy Gillespie song for you right now. It's entitled Bebop. You'll hear all the stuff we've been talking about, fast, intricate. You'll see us sweat. We'll probably make 7 to 12 mistakes somewhere in the median range. So just which isn't bad. I agree. If we keep this in the single digits, we'll be all right. Here we go with Bebop.
Over under on that.
Yeah. I'm taking the over. Good job? Uh-huh. Okay. You said it. All right, how many mistakes did you count?
I don't want to know.
How many? 0? You guys are way more forgiving than me. I'm the Russian judge. You got.
Send the mail.
I know. Fingers weren't meant to move that fast, Kevin. I counted 3 mistakes, but it's fine. It's whatever. I'm a harsh judge. They were all my mistakes. How's that? That's better. Makes you feel better. So so that was the sound of bebop. Literally, that's the name of that song, and we can hear that it was this new language that they were using those kinds of syllables to describe, and that's where we get that name. Because Lord knows you couldn't put lyrics to songs with those kinds of melodies. So instead, it's just random grumblings and random syllables, and now we have these names. So I mentioned he was on the West Coast, and he did these records with Dial. And there's some great recordings that came out of this. Early on, most of what Charlie Parker was doing was playing what Dizzy asked him to play. They would write songs together. Sometimes they would do Dizzy songs. Every now and then they'd do a Charlie Parker song. But these Dial recordings are some of Charlie's earliest fully developed compositions. He remained longtime friends with Dizzy Gillespie, but this was the first time he was out on his own and got to be kind of a full-fledged leader by himself. So one of the songs that he recorded while over there, is one of the first versions of it, was a song that was written over the top of How High the Moon. This is the one that's over How High the Moon. This is the one, yes. This is a tune entitled Ornithology, or the study of birds, because that's his nickname, which we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, this one has another one of these bebop heads, but underneath it, if you know the song How High the Moon, you can sing along. Kevin, if I do this, will you sing How High the Moon while we play? Kevin Smith, ladies. John, that was terrible. I thought it was beautiful. Okay, listen, I got you.
It was heartfelt.
It was heartfelt. I don't want to know what's in that heart, but it was heartfelt. Okay. Here comes the great Charlie Parker composition based on How High the Moon, Ornithology. I talked about how Charlie Parker's language kind of changed the game for jazz musicians. I was listening to Kevin's solo there, and it reminded me that basically before bebop came around, there was only that I know of, about one bass player that did more than just walk quarter notes, or play, a nice solo, but kind of, not anything necessarily exploratory or moving up and down the bass a whole bunch. And that was the great bass player Jimmy Blanton for the Ellington Band. But when Charlie Parker's language came around, we had bassists like Charles Mingus and Oscar Pettiford, and they started trying to play what Charlie was playing on the saxophone on the bass, and then that changed the game. So before that, bass players weren't doing that sort of thing, and now they're almost like a real instrument, like the rest of us. It's like it's about the same. Yeah, okay, we're almost there. Face mask.
On the offensive.
15-yard penalty, personal foul. Where's that flag when you need one?
Pitch clock violation.
I'm going to pay for that later, just so you guys know. I will pay for that later. And I deserve it. So, I mentioned that song was called Ornithology, which is the study, which is focus, Varnes, focus. He's already paying me back. Don't feed the troll.
Don't feed the troll.
That's it. So, ornithology, the study of birds, and bird does have a unique nickname, and the origins of it are kind of funny. When he was back in Kansas City, when he was playing with, I think it was Jay McShann's big band, it was one of those big bands. They're basically touring the Midwest. They didn't have a big tour bus. They usually had a collection of cars, and these like 12 or 14 musicians would split up in somebody's car, and they would drive down these country roads to the next town to go play the big band date. So there's 4 of them in a car. Charlie's not driving, but they're in the car. They're driving, and these are old like country roads, and a lot of these houses have farms and stuff, and so these 2 chickens are quite literally crossing the road. And the guy can't stop in time, and he hits both of the chickens. And then they kind of like get it together, and then he starts driving away, and Charlie flips out. He's like, "What are you guys doing? We could cook those tonight." Like, "Are you kidding me? We just ran those things over with our car." He's like, "Please, we're going to go back and we're going to cook them tonight." So, okay, weird guy. So he went and he got these 2 dead chickens, and he brought them. Back then, these African American musicians, they couldn't stay in hotels at these places, so they had to have basically a network of black families where they could stay on these road trips. So he came to wherever they stayed, whatever house they were planning on staying in. He walked in like holding these 2 yard birds and said, "Please cook these up for us." or me. He said, cook them up for me. So the lady cooked them up, and the word is he would not let anybody touch his 2 Yardbirds. He ate both of those whole chickens by himself. Hence the name Yardbird, or later shortened to Bird. So while he was over in California, I told you that he was really struggling mentally and physically with being alone and kind of his artistic vision being rejected. It wasn't even really that accepted in New York. It was this new sound, and a lot of the old school jazz fans and musicians were not really enjoying this new sound of bebop, and it got worse when he was over in California. So as things kind of spiraled downward, he eventually had an episode where he caught his mattress on fire, and the fire department came and the whole 9 yards. And in that process, he was moved to the mental wing of a jail. And then Howard McGee, this trumpet player who he was really close friends with, a couple other people, came and got him out of jail and got him moved into Camarillo Mental Facility, where he spent 6 months in Camarillo. And Charlie said it was one of the best things that could have happened to him. He said it was like living at a resort. He finally got a chance to kind of get his mental health together. There were reports from the staff who worked there that said he was like the perfect gentleman, and it was like a great experience for him to kind of like get refocused. So in honor of that visit, which he really kind of helped center him, because he was in a really dark place out there and basically thought his career was winding down. He wrote this cool blues. Again, he's a blues guy. He's going to write a blues in the honor of that stay, that 6-month stay. So we're going to play that tune for you right now. It's a great tune entitled "Relaxin' at Camarillo." Whoa. Sorry, time out. Flag of the play. You want to play the intro or we just right out? You want to do the intro? All right. No, we've been rehearsing for months. Trust me. This is like fly by the seat of our pants.
Totally what happened.
Is it good? Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Jackson at Camarillo. Thank y'all. So he's going to get out of the Camarillo, and he's going to realize that he should move back to New York and get back to his buddies and a little bit more familiar territory. When he arrives back in New York, a lot of the scene has finally caught up to him, and they welcome him back with open arms. He has more gigs than he knows what to do with, and he really kind of has, this is the beginning of what is going to be the most fruitful stretch for him. He's going to start working in New York and playing a ton of gigs. Eventually they're going to open up a club in his honor. Like, he's still alive and playing, and they opened up a club basically just for him on 52nd Street entitled Birdland, where Bird would play a whole bunch. But it's really when he went, the first time he got to go overseas and play in Paris. He experienced something there that he had never experienced and never dreamed of experiencing. When he showed up, he was a literal rock star. He played theaters, not tiny jazz clubs with 40 people in it. He was playing these tiny little clubs in New York, and he's going to go and he's going to play concerts, stages, theaters, and people are going to scream and holler at him. And the more he played, the louder they screamed. And he was a literal rock star. And he finally realized that all of this music that he had been working toward, to come so far from basically being at his end in California, thinking all the stuff he had worked on basically was rejected, to go not only get it back in New York, but also go tour Europe and realize that this music was making a profound impact. It just took longer than he had hoped. Was really inspiring for him. And then he's going to come back home and do what he says was the greatest thing he ever got to do, which is that he was signed to a better record label, Verve Records, and they put a lot of money behind him, and they set up a recording session where he got to record with a symphony orchestra. And he got to play, as much as he loved to play, we talked about the 3 Bs, right? As much as he loved to play bebop, he loved just as much, if not more, to play ballads and to play blues. And when he got to do his album with the symphony orchestra, he was known for kind of showing up late to things and always wearing sunglasses indoors and maybe not quite dressing as sharply as everyone else. When he showed up for his recording session for Strings, he was dressed in a suit. He was on time. He was prepared. He learned all the music. He was ready to go. If you haven't really listened to Charlie Parker much yet, to me, this is the record to start with. It's literally called Bird with Strings. It's a beautiful album, and we're gonna play a tune for you right now. So many great songs off this record, Just Friends, and on it goes. I picked this tune especially because it has a significance for me. We're gonna do the song is entitled Laura. And it was my dad's favorite name for a girl, and I have like an older stepsister that I didn't meet for years. And then when I met her, I realized that her name was Laura because my dad loved that name, and my wife is Laura. So I figured of all songs to play off that record, I should probably do this. So when I go home, I'm not sleeping on the couch. So here is the obligatory version that Charlie Parker did with strings entitled Laura. 2, 3, 4. Thank y'all so much. So Bird with Strings, that was recorded between 1949 and 1950, just basically about 10 years or 9 years from the time when he first discovered this new sound. It was 4 or 5 years from when that sound was first recorded and broadcast. So in about 4 or 5 years, this new sound that everyone first rejected and Bird originally thought was an abject failure, it just in a short 4 or 5 years later, it's going to be considered a brand new music and one to be lauded. So this is about 1950. He's going to live a few more years before the alcohol and drug abuse is going to take a toll on his body. But before he passes away, in the same vein of recognizing what a great new art form, a great new language that he brought to American popular music, Massey Hall is going to put on a concert in honor of what these young gentlemen did at Minton's Playhouse to really foster this brand new style of music. So they're going to get Charlie Parker, they're going to get his old pal Dizzy Gillespie, and he's going to get the whole gang together, Charles Mingus on bass and Max Roach on drums, and they're going to do a concert at Massey Hall, and they're going to record it. And it became known either as the Massey Hall concert or more appropriately, it was called the greatest jazz concert of all time. These 5 bebop icons who had all gone their separate ways to have their own solo careers got back together one more time to do a concert. And was that, along with the Bird with Strings and the Paris tour, were some of the highlights of Bird's very short but very powerful career. So we're going to close out tonight's concert with one of the songs off of that record. Before we do, please help me thank one more time on the saxophone, Mr. John Sanford. On piano, Louis Hervo. On upright bass and velvety voice, Mr. Kevin Smith. My name is Justin Barnes. We are the Jazz Legacy Project. Thank you for coming and spending your Sunday evenings with us. I do want to make one quick note. We normally do this one Sunday a month. It's a subscription series. I'm pulling out my phone for a reason. I'm not checking my fantasy football scores. Don't worry. I've already lost. I had a terrible week in fantasy football. Don't get me started. So, however, in November, we're actually going to be playing here on a Wednesday because of the crazy holiday schedule that is the Sundays in November. So we're going to be featuring the music of Horace Silver on Wednesday night, November 15th. So we're here Wednesday, November 15th for the music of Horace Silver, and then we're back on Sunday, December 17th to do the music of the Charlie Brown Christmas. So those are going to be our last 2 concerts for this season. Hope you guys make it out. But before we get to Charlie Brown, let's get back to Charlie Parker. We're going to close out with the great Dizzy Gillespie classic. This is another song that was recorded by Charlie with a very young Miles Davis that Charlie Parker mentored for years. The tune is entitled A Night in Tunisia. Thank you all so much for joining us on this Sunday evening. We really do appreciate it. John, Lewis, Kevin, my name is Justin Barnes. Have a wonderful night. See you all Wednesday, November 15th.